Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for a video channel. Thank you for being here. And this is a missing person segment. And we're going to talk about two cases today. Fascinating. Before I get into that, some people sent in some notes. And I wanted to cover a few of them. And first one is, a very nice person named Sandra from New Jersey sent this in. Dave, I wanted to tell you that my family knows the pain you're in over Ben. We lost my 19-year-old grandson, Briar, to suicide in 2013. He was also a hockey player, as were his three cousins. That keeps them busy, and we keep him out of trouble. Briar was a fine young man. Many people loved and cared about him. He was the captain of the team for several years. He fell in love with a 16-year-old girl and wanted to marry her, but she was too young. They lived together for about a year, and then she wanted to break up. We did seek help for him. He suffered for 3 months before he took his life. He tried to call his father the night it happened, but my son could not hear his phone ringing because he was at the drag races and it was noisy. My son carries so much guilt because of it. I pray for you and your family and my son every night that God can ease the pain in your heart. Now, to end on a good note, I'm excited and I hope we can meet you and Angie on the Bigfoot cruise. It's very easy to see what kind of caring and kind person you are from your shows. You help so many people and are very appreciative. God bless and keep you and your family safe. Thank you. And I don't talk about mental health as much as I should because it is a struggle at times to keep your head above water. I understand that. And suicide is off the charts. I have my personal feelings that a lot of this is triggered by drug abuse, and I think that is a trigger for some mental health conditions. And you're talking to somebody who's done a lot of research on this. And there's some studies that have come out in the last year that are earth-shattering. And I know many of you don't want to hear it, don't want to read it. But I guarantee you that if I had kids today, there's no way I would allow them or encourage them to be using weed. No freaking way. But that's enough about that. Mental health, NAMI, N-A-M-I. Make sure you try to get anyone you know who has mental health issues, get them into a free session of NAMI. They don't charge for anything. It's an outstanding organization. On to something else. Bonnie and Mike sent me this white binder filled with stories about Bigfoot and UFOs in the Ohio area that they have experienced in their life. And I went through and read them, and fascinating. It's like a mini book. And we have something in common because their daughter probably went to Miami at the same time Ben did. But one of the stories I'm going to tell you about I found interesting is about their brother, Kent Weiss. He was a bull hauler who frequently took cattle from Archibald in northwest Ohio to Liberal, Kansas. He was funny and one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. He was the owner of an operator of a 78 Kenworth. He loved that truck and took a lot of pride in keeping it spruced up, frequently adding lights, horns, etc. Kent was a tough guy, but not scared until one night in 2006. Kent was loaded and headed out west again. It was late at night, and he had gotten a late start and was extremely tired. So about an hour west of Indianapolis, he started looking for a place to pull over and get some shut-eye. So he got off of Interstate 70 and pulled to the side of an entrance ramp and laid over on the seat and went to sleep. He's not sure what woke him up, but suddenly he startled awake and sat up and jerked to look over the passenger window. Heart pounding, he was instantly afraid, but didn't know why. That wasn't until standing 30 feet away was this thing. In the glow of the red and yellow cab marker lights, it was a big man-like, really tall creature covered in hair, staring at him. He said a fear came over him that thing was terrifying him. He couldn't believe or understand what he was looking at. He had several thoughts that went through his mind, like it had been living in the wild for a long time. Its hair was matted and dirty. It looked really creepy, and the eyes looked like pure evil. One thing that really got him was that the eyes glowed red in the outside of the truck lights as it continued to stare at him. He felt at one point it was close enough to look in the truck window at him, and it was probably what woke him up. He was so terrified, all he thought of was getting out of there. He looked at the creature again, but slammed his truck into gear and got out of there as fast as he could. He was one shook-up dude. To this day, he has no idea what the creature was, but the sighting continues to haunt him. He often wondered if it was a Bigfoot. To him, it was indeed a monster, a fearful sight that Luke talked about 2,000 years ago. Kent fought a long battle with cancer, passed away in 2021. We all miss him. This Kent with his truck that he was driving. Thank you, Bonnie and Mike, for those stories. I read them this afternoon. Fascinating. We appreciate them. Now, today, I'll tell you about a story out of Utah and a story out of another country. Let's go to the Utah story first. A man named John Jones, 70 years old, went disappeared October 23rd, 1971 in Sulphur Basin, Utah. Sulphur Basin. Where is that? If you guys have ever been to Capitol Reef State Park or National Park, it's right on the fringe of Capitol Reef. This is the area, Thousand Lake Mountain, where they were having their deer hunting camp. This area can get very remote, folks. Very remote. One of the things that I actually think about this, when I'm very remote areas, I think I may be even more cautious than I normally am. A couple of weeks ago, Angie and I went and got some wild blueberries at a farm about 2 hours from where we live. We were in the middle of nowhere. We come around a corner, and all of a sudden, there's no traffic on the road, and all of a sudden we're backed up in a long line of traffic. And on the straightaway, it looks like it's a head-on collision. Looks like somebody was trying to pass somebody on the straightaway, somebody else pulled out. Somebody was in bad shape. And we both talked about it. Angie's an RN. And we said, this is like the worst place in the world to get seriously injured. You have a magic hour when you're seriously injured to get help. And usually if you don't get to an ER within that hour, you're going to die if you have internal injuries because you're going to bleed out. It's called the magic hour. And when you get hurt way out in the middle of nowhere, like this person was in this accident, I don't think they have much hope. I think they called for air evac. Helicopter was probably coming, but the helicopter had to have been 20, 25 minutes away. 20, 25 minutes in, 20, 25 minutes out, plus time on the ground. That's really a thin line to live by. And when you're hunting, or you're way out in the middle of the woods, and you get lost, you get hurt, chances of you surviving, very slim. And that's what this story's about. Hunting in Sulphur Basin. This man was from Modesto, California, area south of Sacramento, in the San Joaquin Valley. It gets really hot there in the summer. I actually took some police classes, some advanced police officer classes there at Modesto Junior College during my years as a policeman. They'd send us there for advanced officer training if you wanted to get it. I went to DEA school there, Drug Enforcement Administration school, before I went undercover. Yeah, Modesto's an interesting place. But he went there with 3 friends. And John was a retired farmer, And once he retired from farming, he started to paint houses on the side. So he was still pretty active. They established their hunting camp at about 8,500 feet near the southeast end of Thousand Lake Mountain, north of Torrey, in Wayne County, Utah. Very rural county, not a huge population. Well, Jones was a very experienced hunter, and he was with Owen Bradley from Modesto, Robert Heyer from Fresno, and John Fassler from Manteca, all super experienced men. Well, the hunters said that they can't explain it, but they all went out together. And not long after they left the camp, John just disappeared. They couldn't explain it. None of them could. Now, they've all hunted together for decades. They knew the area well. The idea that John got lost didn't make sense to anybody. And the other thing that didn't make sense is that he couldn't hear them calling for him. Well, they weren't sure how it happened. They searched for the rest of that day on the 23rd. Early on the 24th, when he didn't come back, they called the sheriff. Well, they had to go out and contact the sheriff, and they brought him in. Weather was starting to be a stormy, cold time during the next couple days. And the Wayne County Sheriff D. Lyle Johnson took over the search. He got as many people as he could. They converged on the area, and there were a handful of people that were ground pounders. In between the intermittent weather, the sheriff flew his own airplane looking for John. But the weather continued to deteriorate. And his friends decided that they were going to go out and search as well. So they took certain portions of the grids as well. When the sheriff asked the hunters for kind of a profile on John, he learned that John had recently recovered from a mild heart attack. Every time I hear this and somebody goes out into the woods by themselves, it kind of blows me away. Again, hunting is not one of those things you do by yourself if you're medically compromised, especially if you don't have a personal locator beacon. Well, on the first day of the search, they found no tracks. There was 14 inches of snow on the ground and fierce winds. Day 2, the sheriff brought in equestrians, horseback riders. They combed the area, and their main edict was to see if they could find any tracks at all of John. Again, from the point where John was last seen with his group, they couldn't find any more tracks. Day 3, John's son, Ken, got involved, and he requested the sheriff bring in more resources. Well, the sheriff was in a tough position. He's in a very rural county. Rural county meaning population isn't that big. When you don't have a big population, you don't have many searchers. Without a big population in the county, you also don't have a big budget in your sheriff's department. But there was a small amount of people still on the ground, including his friends. The weather continued to deteriorate to the point that the sheriff couldn't put his own plane in the sky. And on the last 2 days, he had ranchers on horseback in the area with his deputies looking. It was stormy, it was cold, it was not a time to be around on the ground. In fact, some of the articles stated it was brutally cold with high winds. And near the end of the search, there was now 2 feet of snow on the ground. Now, John's friends were true friends. They stayed on site and searched in the horribly bad weather. When the search and rescue termed, the sheriff called John's wife, sat down with the rest of the searchers. They all agreed that there was no way he could have survived how cold, windy, and brutally the weather had turned since the time he had disappeared. and the fact that they didn't know where to search because they couldn't find any tracks. When I finished doing the research on this case, I sat down and I looked at my book, Missing 411 Hunters. It's a thick book, one of the thickest ones I wrote. Since that time, I have probably documented double the amount of hunters in that book. And I don't think the hunting industry does enough to prepare hunters when they're lost. Agreed. A lot of hunters have a lot of testosterone. I'll never get lost. It'll never happen to me. And they invest thousands of dollars into their optics and rifle, and they won't spend one penny on a personal locator beacon. I find that kind of humorous. I wish that hunting classes would inform all hunters about PLBs and the need for them. I think it would save a lot of lives. On to the second case. Earlier this year, I spoke to you about a man named Albert Calabet, a retired LA County deputy sheriff that disappeared in Greece. Do you remember that? Well, I'll try to remember to put the link on this video of his disappearance. And there have been other disappearances in Greece this year. And in fact, this is the only year I can ever remember people disappearing in bulk from Greece. But here we have another one. And this one is just bizarre. It involves a man named Filip Ziaja, 38 years old, missing July 12th, 2024. Give you a couple pictures of Filip. He's fluent in Polish and English. He's 6'2", brown hair, brown eyes, bilingual, lives in Toronto, and he works as a software engineer for a company called Leap Tools. Leap Tools owns Roomvo, if you guys know what that is. This is the wanted poster on Filip. Now, on July 7th, Filip left Canada for Greece. And what he was going to do is it was going to be a working holiday. As a software engineer, he had the ability to work remotely as long as he put his hours in every day. Take your computer with you, you log in, and you write software. And your bosses can see how many hours a day you work. What does it matter where you are as long as you're doing your work? Well, Filip was going to go to Greece. He had been there the year before, and he really enjoyed his time there. So he leaves on the 7th of July of this year. On the 8th, he arrives right on schedule, takes his computer out, works a little bit, and then he worked every day, just like he said he would, up until July 12th. On July 12th was the last day he logged into his project at work. He told friends and family that he wanted to climb Mount Olympus in Greece. And he was staying at an Airbnb in Thessaloniki, Greece. Let me show you that. This is where he was staying. It's the second largest city in Greece. And this is where is the gateway to Mount Olympus. It's about a 1 hour and 8 minute ride by car. And then you trailhead for the Olympus is right here. This is the Thermatic Gulf. So you got water very close everywhere where he was. Now, before we go too far, let me explain something. Filip wasn't just your average guy. He was described as brilliant. I've met a lot of software engineers. I hired a lot of them. Many of them are way outside my pay grade as far as smarts. He was one of those guys, no doubt. Well, on the 12th, people knew he was going to leave for Mount Olympus, so that was no big deal. Logged off. And on the 13th and the 14th, it was expected that he was going to be traveling down to that area and climbing. Presumably, he would have logged back on the 15th. Employers are pretty casual about this. People working remote, as long as you get your work done, they don't really push you very hard. They don't really keep tabs on you. As long as you get your time in, eventually. Well, this employer was very understanding. And they didn't start raising the flag until July 26th. They couldn't reach him on his computer, email, text, phone, nothing. But they knew his brother, who lived in Mississauga, Canada. Well, the employer contacts the brother and stated that they hadn't heard from him since the 12th. So the family tried contacting Filip multiple ways. Never happened. Nothing. They ended up calling the Greece police, reported him as missing, and then the entire family decided they better go down there and find him. Now, you need to know this has never happened before to this family. Filip was always diligent. He always kept in touch, told people what he was doing, where he was going. So him just disappearing wasn't right. And I'm sure they were thinking, well, he's going to climb Mount Olympus. Maybe he disappeared on the mountain, disappeared on the trail, and Greece police would start a search. That's what you'd think. Now let's talk about Mount Olympus for a second. 9,572 feet. If you've never heard of Mount Olympus, see, I'm part Greek, so I know this stuff. It's the mythological home to the Greek gods. And it was the first national park in Greece. They have several Christian monuments, churches, monasteries on the mountain. It's very sacred. About 10,000 people every year climb it. It's not a rough climb. In fact, it's considered a non-technical climb. And the last, say, half mile of it is considered what's called a class 3, and it's really just a rock scramble to the top. If you've never been on, I've been on a lot of 14ers, 14,000 foot mountains when we lived in Colorado. So 9,500 feet, not a biggie. Not a biggie. And non-technical. So probably anybody that walks without a cane and can stand up straight could make the mountain. So the family gets there, and the police, they find out, had searched the Airbnb where he was staying. Police stated that they found his suitcase and personal effects, but his backpack and his phone were missing. And according to everything they could find, his last known location was the Airbnb. Let's think about this. His suitcase is gone. Cell phone, well, anyone who's in their 30s, like Filip was at 38, you're going to have your cell phone with you. And if you're going to climb a mountain, take your cell phone. So having your cell phone and backpack on, completely normal. And it fits with what he was doing. Now at this point, wanted posters started to go up around Greece. And that's a double-edged sword. When this poster goes up, people start thinking, oh, I saw that guy. Oh, I saw him there. I saw him there. And the reality is you're chasing rumors and things all over the country. Now, Greece is the size of many states in the U.S., so you're chasing it all over a state-size area. And they had several people calling saying, I saw him, I saw him, I saw him. Oh, he looked real rough. He looked like he was homeless. A lot of those stories. Problem was, Filip never had any mental illness. Didn't use drugs. So none of that made any sense. They still did chase it down, and they could never confirm if anyone really saw him or not. But please remember, Filip always kept in touch with his family. No mental illness. They contacted the U.S. Embassy for help. Well, they didn't do much. And the family said that the Greece police really did nothing at all. Let me tell you a story. At my conferences, I meet people from all over the world. One of these conferences, a man sat down next to me who I had communicated with many times. I just never met him. And he was a retired State Department official. And we had this long conversation about people who get lost in other countries. He said, Dave, now, meaning right now, is not the time to get lost in another country. I said, why is that? And he said, because our State Department is worthless. I go, what do you mean? He said, they're weak. They're viewed throughout the world as weak. They don't want to do anything. He says, it's horrible. He goes, I retired just in time. I couldn't have worked under this State Department administration because they don't seem to care about anything. And he said, if you get lost in another country, there's a very good chance you're not going to get any help at all. Another reason I tell you this is I know that there's a lot of young people graduating from college want to go on that trip to another country. Well, I understand that. And traveling's fun. But right now is the last time in my entire life that I could speak that I would go to another country. I would never go at this point. No way. If you look at the problems that they're having in the UK and France and Europe, there's no way I would travel. Too dangerous in my opinion, including Mexico. Mexico is one of the most dangerous places in the world right now to travel. If you got plans to travel to Mexico, there's no way I would go. Not a chance. Hawaii, for sure. Other places in the States, for sure. Out of the country, no way. Again, if you get into trouble in another country and you expect the State Department to help, they're not coming to save you. They're not going to bring out the Air National Guard or the Marines or the Green Berets to search for you. None of that is going to happen. It's a very dangerous time right now. Now, he was traveling internationally. Rule number one, don't travel internationally alone, especially if you're a young female. Number two, leave detailed itinerary for your loved ones and stick to it. If you don't stick to it, tell them what you're changing. Text with people daily and have a magical word in that text every day. Poppies, rose, whatever, that only you and your relatives know. I hate to say it, that when people get kidnapped and held in other countries, people use their phone and text back and forth to their family like they are you. And unless you have that special secret word, nobody will know what happened to you for sometimes weeks. Always leave your phone on. When you turn your phone off, people can't find you. Now, I was recently told by somebody in the industry, it's kind of shocking news, that when you turn your phone off, there's a secondary battery in your cell phone. I never knew this. I bet you didn't know this. And then when you turn that phone off, it's not really off. And when you turn the location segments off in your phone, they're not really off. I didn't know that either. This came from somebody who is way up there in data recovery, way smarter than me. And I didn't ask for the information. We just happened to be talking about something and he told me. And I couldn't believe it. So I always thought, well, if you turn your phone off or you have the location services off, they don't really know where you are. And not true. But as far as local law enforcement, state police, the only thing we can track is if your phone's on. So leave it on. And lastly, a lot of people don't know when you go to another country, you can buy a service plan through your phone carrier. So it's cheaper to call and text while you're in that other country. If you're with AT&T, you call AT&T service department, say, hey, I want a European plan for a week. It's not that expensive. But if you didn't have it, it would be very expensive. So, just so you know. Now, Filip has not been found. And in fact, his relatives had to go back to Canada frustrated as all heck because they're not getting any assistance out of Greece. They're pretty sure he made it to the mountain. But because nobody had searched for him, and they didn't even put any flyers out on the mountain or contact anybody who could have been in the area at that time. Like go into the town that's the gateway to the mountain, go to those hotels and say, hey, did you possibly climb the mountain today? Did you see my brother? Leave a pamphlet under the door, things like that. Police didn't do that. So they really have no idea where he is at all. He just like evaporated away. And that's the frustrating thing about being in another country. You just don't get that assistance. So, thanks for being here. Remember, kindness is contagious. You smile at people, you watch, you'll get a smile back. If you're kind to people, that's good karma. It'll come back to you. It's a kindness revolution. Please make sure you're subscribed. The amount of people that have not been unsubscribed forcibly is unbelievable. Make sure you're getting your notifications. I post every other day. And my movies are on Tubi for free, Apple TV for free, Vimeo for free. Check them out. Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted, and Missing 411 The UFO Connection. Paulides out.